Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here with Onar. We're going to be having a discussion about the D and the M side of the view of genes. Is that fair to say?
And we're going to talk about biology and the integrated view.
But to start off, we want to say a few things about the discussion with Rucka.
Yeah, I like when we first had our first conversation. I had only heard half of your conversation when we reacted to it, and afterwards, when I saw the rest of it, I could see that Rucka has milded his criticism substantially. He was very reasonable in that discussion. It was very nice to see that he came down from being very fangs out down to being much more reasonable. And when he reacted to our conversation about that video, he only after 55 minutes into the conversation had something to react to negatively, which I think is major progress. If he could watch for 55 minutes without having anything to complain about, then we did a pretty good job. But I think that he did make a valid point. He didn't call me racist or something like that. But it's sort of like implied that we're playing with the devil or something along the line. So he did call me a biological determinist and say that I rejected the blank slate and free will. So I just wanted to push back on that. But it's fair enough that he didn't actually say that I was a racist. That he's just not interested in talking about that. And in fact that brings us to the topic, because rather than spending so much time talking about biology in relation to group, I think it's much, much more salient to talk about the importance of biology to each individual. How can you apply it in your own life, and what effects does it have?
Yeah, I would say even if we can learn something about the biology of the individual by looking at mass groups, still we don't know anything about any given individual person, and that's the only people that really exist as individual people. That's the ones who we're really concerned with, and they're the only ones we can really deal with. So even though you can study the genetic basis of diabetes in large groups, you still have to individually go to the doctor and find out whether or not you have diabetes.
Yes. But if you have diabetes, that is going to have a massive impact in your life. Not just because it's a statistical reality, because it's actually a reality in your life, right? So the misintegrated view of biology is that biology determines everything. That's biological determinism. Ideas don't matter. Everything is really about genes. Those are the ones that play out. That's biological determinism, and it's misintegration.
Now that would be a racist society. That would be
not just a racist society, but like all the people who are basically saying that society as a whole doesn't have any free will, or individuals don't have free will. It's just determined by your genes or whatever. That is biological determinism, and it doesn't have to necessarily be racism. Like you have sexism, like women can never ever be good at math and so forth, that kind of thing. That would be biological determinism. The rejection of that leads to a false dichotomy. When you're saying biology means nothing, it's only ideas that matter, biology is irrelevant. When you say that, you're going directly from M over to D, disintegration type.
Now that's a very easy to do away with, that argument that biology means nothing, because first of all, you can't think when you're hungry, but it's much deeper than that though. But go ahead. But in other words, biology basically definitely is there, even in very easy ways. Like if you're a male, you like tools. If you're a female, you like people. If you're hungry, you can't concentrate. If you're cold, you can't concentrate, etc. So biology is definitely a backdrop we live with.
Yes, but when I say biology in this context, we're talking basically about things like innate personality traits or tendencies and IQ. Um, so let me just start with this notion that IQ has something to do with ideas. They largely don't. And the case that you don't have to have a perfect philosophy to do good IQ research. And I'm just going to give an example, and people can judge for themselves. If there's been done a lot of adoption studies on IQ, and what they find is that an adopted child has an IQ that is more correlated with a random person on the street than with their adoptive parents. That's the harsh. What that means is that the adoptive parents have no impact on IQ.
Right. You're closer to society in general than two random people in that society.
Yes, that's basically what that means. Or the two parents in society might differ greatly from the average, and the
more important, not two random people, but the two people that raised you.
Yes.
And have no genetic connection to you.
Yes.
Are farther from you in IQ than just
people you've never met.
Than just the average of people on the street. Okay.
That shows how little ideas have to do with IQ. And just to clinch the matter, the person that they are most correlated with in terms of IQ is their biological mother that they have never spoken a single word to.
Most correlated with.
Yes. So the person that they have most in common with in terms of IQ, closest in IQ, is their biological mother who gave the child away before they said a single word.
Yeah. Now, I've seen things about this with identical twins that are separated as well.
That you can do the same thing with twins. It's the same thing. Identical twins separated at birth have like 90% plus correlation in IQ. It's like insane. So basically, intelligence is like height. It doesn't have anything to do with IQ. Now, with ideas, it's about biology. It's a physiological trait, like height. So, and we just have to accept that ideas, except for on a very, very basic level, don't impact IQ. And I'm pretty sure that Rocca, if he said he went through 4 phases, being religious, then skeptic, then nihilist, then objectivist. If he had taken an IQ test in all of those phases, he would come up with exactly the same IQ in all of those phases of his life. Because ideas don't impact intelligence. They do impact wisdom. They do impact whether your choices are good or not, but that doesn't have to do anything with intelligence.
IQ goes up over time, though.
IQ is an imperfect measurement. It's like a little bit like satellite measurements. There might be drifts in the satellite data. So just because the average IQ measure increases doesn't mean that the underlying general intelligence increases. So how do we know this? Because I'm going to just give you one crazy intelligence test. If you put two buttons in front of you, and you are asked to push one of those buttons when it lights up, and you do it, that's correlated with IQ. And they have like if you show a blink, a flash in front of, this is the test that's most correlated with IQ or intelligence. If you show a flash of 2 lines on your eyes, where one is a little bit shorter than the other, then you're asked which one of the lines was the long one. Was it the one on the right or the left? And they start out by showing it for 1 second, right, or something like that. And then you see now, it's the one on the right. And then they keep on reducing the time that you are allowed to see this pattern on your image, on your eyes. And at some point, you fail to be able to distinguish the two because you can't you get too little information. It's too quick a flash. That's strongly correlated with intelligence.
How long you can see this thing?
How short the blink can be until you fail.
Now, as evidence for that, I have to say I did have a battery of cognitive tests once because my older brother is schizophrenic, and this was 20 years ago now. And they did all kinds of things with me, and the doctor said to me at the end, he said, thank you, this was fun. I haven't had fun administering these tests in a long time. Thank you. And
that means that you scored well.
Yeah, and there were quite a few things on it where they commented just on simple things, though. I mean, one of them was dotting my I's back and forth to see these things on a screen or something.
Yeah,
and they said
intelligence.
And she said you went on a lot longer than most people do,
which is correlated with intelligence.
Yeah. So just well, I mean, that's a little upsetting. We're right up against the tough stuff here. Then we're being naughty. We're being very naughty.
Yeah, but we're keeping it at an individual level. We're not talking about groups. We're talking about actual real individuals with real brains, not group brains.
So some individuals have lower IQ than others, and there's nothing they can do about that.
Because it's biological.
Biological.
Jordan Peterson has made this point repeatedly, that it's easy to lower people's IQ. You can just put lead in their water. You can give them bad food. You can put a pin into their head or hit them over the head, and they will have a lower IQ. So lowering people's IQ is super easy. Increasing their IQ is basically impossible. Once they reach their genetic and biological potential, you can you can throw anything at a person. He's not going to score higher.
Yeah, but I don't... okay, so that obviously is just not really very important if we look at North and South Korea.
That's true. I mean, I gave the example of St. Lucia.
I'll grant to you that it's important if we don't control for it by clamping some philosophy down on top. Like the philosophy, the ideas of Africa, the philosophy of Asia are kind of intact over the last thousands of years. Some changes have been made with Marxism in the last 100 years, but China is Confucian China to a pretty big extent still, and Africa's tribal Africa. So, okay, I don't know. All right.
As I've said in a previous video, culture is sticky on average, right? On average, culture sticks around. And the longer a culture has been around, the more sticky it is.
All right, but then we've got Hong Kong and Singapore, and we've got North versus South Korea. So obviously ideas, okay, let's grant that genetics are there.
Yeah.
Ideas are obviously what's more important. By far more important.
Yes, and we can go through some real cases of this. I just wanted to really hammer home that intelligence, the research on intelligence is very solid. It's like orders of magnitude more solid than anything else in psychology. It's really solid. And
but granting that we solidly know that the Koreans are intelligent and can do math well, look at North Korea. I mean, you can see why people are wondering what exactly is going on here. Why is this okay, look at South Africa versus Somalia. South Africa was a British protectorate. It was, they had good philosophy. They had belief in free trade and contract law and individual rights. So South Africa, there on the African continent with African people in it, did very well. Maybe under apartheid. Maybe this is a bad example I'm giving.
It's not the perfect example, but the perfect example are the near African nations in the Caribbean. They're 95% black.
St. Lucia, which you mentioned.
St. Lucia have a GDP of 15,000 per capita. And
North Korea,
the crime
1,000.
rate, if you just go have a look at the crime rate in St. Lucia. It's much lower than in America. So the blacks in St. Lucia, not as criminal and not as violent as in America.
So ideas and culture are far, far more important than this background of 1-2% difference in genetics here and there.
No, I'm going to. That sounds like you're pitting them up against each other. Like biology is not important, ideas are important.
Well, it's kind of
actually.
All right, go ahead.
It's actually that since biology is important, then ideas are super important because now ideas really make a difference. So we've given the example of diabetes before. If you don't have any kind of sensitivity to sugar, your choices don't matter. You can have good or bad ideas when it comes to eating sugar. You're not going to get diabetes. But if you have a genetic predisposition for diabetes, your ideas of what, like the outcome in terms of your health, are going to be dramatically different depending on your ideas.
Okay, diabetes is low IQ and sugar is altruism.
Well, I don't want to make that broad of a generalization just yet.
Okay.
I think that's a too large leap. Let's go into specifics first, okay? So my perfect example of how people who reject biological reality does so much damage is phonics versus whole word reading method. So the progressive, John Dewey was a progressive. He called himself individualist, but he was really a collectivist because he was saying everyone is the same, and therefore everyone is interchangeable in the group. Which is a collectivist idea. Well, he basically made whole word reading popular, and that's like reading hieroglyphs as opposed to reading the individualist method, reading one letter at a time. And as it turns out, reading hieroglyphs is very IQ demanding. Like they do this in China, and their average IQ reflects that. They have to have a high IQ just to be able to read. So in China, I think that the threshold for being able to read is around 100 IQ. Like you can't read if you're less than 100 IQ. You can't read a newspaper. So there are many illiterate people in China because it's just so freaking hard to learn a hieroglyphic system. But the threshold for learning phonics is maybe like IQ 60, something like that. Basically, it's very inclusive. Everyone could learn to read. But if you now go and pretend that everyone can become a rocket scientist, biology doesn't matter, and IQ is a social construct, and ideas are what matters, not IQ, then you start teaching whole word to everyone and thinking that's a good idea. Now, if you have an IQ above 110, then you're not damaged by whole word. Basically, you're either able to reinvent the phonics methods on your own. You are inducing from reality the phonics method, or you're surrounded by other smart people who teach you the phonics method behind closed doors. If you are so unlucky to have an IQ below 110, and remember that 110 is above average, right? So almost everyone is hurt by the whole word method. But the lower IQ you have, the more you're hurt by the whole word method. So there was some statistic, I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but 16% of whites today in America are functionally illiterate. They basically can't read a drug prescription. And 40% of blacks are functionally illiterate today. And if you go back to the 1920s and the 1930s, before they introduced this whole word method, then the literacy rate among blacks was higher than it is today, because they can use phonics method, which helps people who have an IQ below 110 to read better.
Or to read at all.
Or to read at all, right, yes. So that's just one example of where if you pretend that IQ doesn't exist and biology doesn't matter, then you're literally like creating a huge divide between those who can read and those who can't read. So like that's like a disaster in your life if you can't read.
I want to point out that this look-say method was invented by intelligentsia, who noticed a weird thing about reading. And I've got right up here on the screen this brain study. If you can read this, you have a strong mind, and it's written in a combination of numbers and letters. It says, this message serves to prove how our mind can do amazing things, impressive things. And so they learned that you can garble words, or you can move the letters around in a word. And if you know the word and you've read it dozens or hundreds of times, then your brain just glances at it and knows what that word is. Even if you've replaced T with the letter 7, your brain just goes, I think this is the word this.
Yeah.
And so your brain is able to do it because it's already done it so many times. Now they took that, this little intellectual game that you can play if you know how to read already. They took that and they said, let's make this the basis of teaching reading.
Yeah.
And that's the
that basically destroyed the minds of everyone with an IQ below 90, right?
Yeah, and it's not going to hurt the people with really high IQs. Either their parents are going to help teach them, or they're going to be able to learn it themselves. This is damaging mostly to the lower IQ groups,
regardless of race.
Regardless of race. So that's why half of white people in America today can't read properly, and I know some of these people.
Yes. So, and reading properly, that's half of the population, but 16% are actually functionally illiterate, meaning that they can write their name, but they can't understand a drug prescription or an instruction manual, right? Or write a letter, like a letter of recommendation or something like that. That's just beyond them. That's 16% of whites, which is a crazy high number if you can't read your drug prescription.
I'm really tempted to think it's higher than that. I really doubt that 84% of whites could read a drug prescription label and understand it. Really doubt it.
Quite possible. It might have gone up since I saw this study.
Could be.
Okay, so if that was just one example. I'll give another example. We know that having a two-parent family is very beneficial to children. Like if they have a mother and a father in the house, that's good for the children. Now, which group benefits most from having a father and a mother in the house? It turns out that is children with low IQ, or parents with low IQ, for that matter. So if you have a low IQ, you benefit most from banding up as a nuclear family.
High IQ people will do well on their own.
They can manage because they're flexible.
Better than a low IQ person could manage on their own.
Now, they might be damaged, but they can still manage, right?
They're more likely to be able to manage.
Yes. But if you have a low IQ, let's say you have an IQ of 85 or below, that's like something like 20% of the population. Well, then you're screwed if you become a single mother, because you're not capable of having enough income to provide for your child properly, and you're not smart enough to compensate for not having a father in the house. And the children who are growing up, they're not smart enough to pick up what they need from their surroundings, because they really need a father to spell things out for them.
Now,
right?
as you're saying this, are you praising the tradition of the nuclear family then? Are we giving Jordan Peterson 1 point here for...
We're definitely giving him a point on that. The nuclear family is, if you want to have your children, if you care about your children, you care about the nuclear family. It's as simple as that. So if once you make a choice of having children, the nuclear family is the way to go.
Now, is the nuclear family an arbitrary social construct or a biological fact?
It's a biological fact. It evolved probably around 2 million years ago. So monogamy arose in our ancestors 2 million years ago. We've been monogamous for 2 million years.
Does that mean that we're biologically determined to reproduce in a certain way then? We don't have free will about reproduction?
Well, we know that it's perfectly possible to reproduce in other ways. But it's like, what is the best growing environment for human flourishing? That's basically what we're talking about.
Yeah. But just to make the broader point that we do have a background biological reality sexually, people wouldn't make any qualms about that. That's
right. That's right.
But okay.
So now I'm giving two really harsh examples that are just killers to the low IQ people, the low IQ communities or community in America. If you hit them with whole word reading and you hit them with the idea that we should break up the nuclear family, those who suffer the absolute hardest is the 20% least intelligent people of society. Now, if you're wondering about where this opioid crisis is coming from, which is mostly white people, I can guarantee you that the average IQ of those people who are struck by the opioid crisis is leaning on the lower side of the average. So
how do you guarantee that?
Because if you're like the opioid crisis has been shown to be strongly connected to shipment of factory work out of America into China. Wherever you get that, you get the opioid crisis blooming up. And factory work is not something that people with 100 IQ, 120 or above 100 IQ typically do. They go to colleges and so forth, right? So this strikes middle America and perhaps a little bit lower than middle America, right? And the higher IQ you have, the more equipped you are to deal with situations that may arise. You have more options, and therefore, just statistically, you're more likely to get out of trouble or stay away from trouble.
All right, so fair enough. Not a real world proof, but a logical proof.
Yes.
In inference. Inference.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and I'm specifically not saying, I'm bringing up whites who are the mostly struck by the opioid crisis, because people talk about all the problems in the black community. Well, this doesn't have to do with just one group of people. It has to do with all Americans, and it doesn't depend on your skin color. If you're hit with certain types of behaviors or incentives, that's going to go down very bad with low IQ people.
It's going to hurt them the most.
Yes, it's going to hurt them the most. Yeah. And so now let's talk about the factory workers, because what they were told by these wonderful progressives who don't believe in intelligence is that learn to code. You've got to learn to code. Because all you need to do when you lose your factory work is just to take a university degree.
Yeah. So,
and if you tell that to someone with an IQ 90, you're basically insulting their intelligence, literally.
Yeah, you're telling them come to Silicon Valley. There's plenty of people hiring in Silicon Valley for $100,000 a year jobs. What's wrong with you? You're a lazy piece of garbage sitting out there in Indiana.
It's like that. I don't remember her, the French queen who asked, "Why don't they just eat cake?" The people who are hungry, right?
Why don't they just code?
Yeah, that's the same thing, and it's extremely insulting. And it's like you're looking at someone if you're looking at someone who's handicapped and they can't get on the bus because of they can't get up into the bus with their wheelchair or something like that. And you just say to them, why don't you just pick up your wheelchair and go into the bus? And that's a very insulting thing to say to them because they are bound to their wheelchair. They're limited. Now, I'm not comparing people with low IQ to handicapped, but I'm just saying that they are more limited.
Seems that you are.
I just wanted to say that I don't think that they are mentally handicapped.
Right.
But they have limitations that people with higher IQ don't have. And so easy for a super duper smart progressive with his cognitive elite and say, well, anyone can be anything. I can be anything. And one of the advantages of denying intelligence is that you can take credit for your hard work. Look, I do so well in school. It's because I work so hard. No, it's because you can afford to be lazy because you have a high IQ and you were born with it.
Now you tell a liberal this and they'll say something like, well, moving forward, we need to push through this and really make an effort to make community education available to everybody.
Well, you could have been a politician.
Isn't that their answer to this?
Yes.
When we say learning to code is not easy for everybody, that's what they're going to say. Moving forward, we need to make education available to everybody.
Yeah, that's just crap. What you need to is not education because there are people who can never go to university.
Or if they do, it's a waste of time.
Let me give you just an example. There are extremely few individuals who have graduated from university with an IQ lower than 90. Like, if you have an IQ lower than 90, you can graduate from university if you work your ass off and just, like, sweat through it and have a determination made of steel. But it's just so difficult, and it's really rare. Almost no one do it. So, basically, if you have an IQ below 90, university is not an option. And just think about that. What kind of work is not an option then if you have an IQ below 90? You can't become a doctor. You can't become a rocket scientist. You can't become a programmer. You can't become a lawyer, or a teacher for that matter. Like, think about all the things you can't be if you have an IQ below 90. And just say that we're going to make education available to everyone. That's an insult to those people who have an IQ below 90 because they can't. Making an education available to them would involve giving them a new brain.
Right. Now,
they can't become highly educated.
Now, that's just a fact of reality, and pilots are required to have 20/20 vision to fly commercial airliners, and if you wear glasses, you're not a pilot, period.
And Michael Jordan and all the basketball players are required to be very tall.
Yeah. Mr. Cropper went and tried out for the NBA, and he gave it all his willpower, and he is not an NBA player today.
There you go, biological determinism.
I'm biologically determined to be slower and not be able to jump as high as Michael Jordan. So,
yes.
So I'm inferior, therefore I should do something bad to him because I'm inferior to him then, right?
Notice here now that the idea that you can be anything is extremely damaging, precisely because you can't do anything.
What do you mean? You're referring to comparing yourself to others instead of...
Well, yeah, that's part of it, but I'm talking about if you believe that you can become a professor of law, but you have an IQ of 90, and everyone around you is filling you with that idea that you can become anything you want if you just put your mind to it, that is going to ruin your life. That's a life-ruining event. Yeah. So now that's the power of ideas the other way. That's like being being struck by North Korea, right? It's like it's a wave of bad ideas that leads to a host of really bad decisions in your life. You're trying to get into law school. You should not be doing that if you have an IQ of 90. and you're setting yourself up for failure. Like people who would normally be completely happy with, like, I'm happy with being short and not being able to dunk. I can never do that. I don't feel like a lesser human being because I can't beat Michael Jordan on the basketball court. But if you say to people that they should expect to be anything, they should be superstars, and they should be whatever they want to, whatever they wish for, if they just work hard enough for it, you're setting a large part of the population up for failure, regardless of race.
Right? Yeah, and we definitely see a lot of that happening today. People go to college and they get their arts degree or whatever, and then they're a waitress.
That's right. So you can always get through college if you take something that's not cognitively demanding, like all these feminist studies. Like that.
That's why it's happening. Now, honestly, when you were talking earlier, I was saying to myself, I said, well, the really smart people are dropping out of college. They're not going. They're just going and starting a career or something. I mean, the colleges are so bad in America today that intelligent people are skipping colleges unless they can get into a good one, but by and large. So I'm thinking as you're going, I'm going, okay, the smart people aren't in college, it's dumb people in the colleges. So that would mean that they must be studying something besides what's different. You're saying it takes an IQ of 90 to graduate from college. I'm seeing a lot of college graduates with IQs of 75 and 60. So all these social justice warriors with pink hair that have feminism degrees are not.
No, they don't have. Most of them don't have an IQ of 75 or 60. I can guarantee you that.
You think they have high IQ, but they've been fooled?
I strongly doubt that they have 120 IQ, but they might have just 100 IQ. And you can graduate from feminist studies with IQ of 100 because it only takes 5 minutes to learn feminist studies.
Right.
Everything is male patriarchy, and if something's wrong, it's the men. Now,
right.
Okay.
That was way shorter than 5 minutes, and you've already covered it all.
I covered the whole topic, but in order to make it sound like more academic, you have to put in some difficult words.
Right.
And that takes actually 5 minutes to learn.
Fair enough.
But basically, it's like anyone who has a relatively high IQ can learn feminist studies in 5 minutes, and you can basically I can go into any class on any kind of study and do really well just by babbling some bullshit based on the fact that I have a high IQ, and I can sound plausible. I might even get published for saying some complete crap.
All right, so we've got to the point here where we've said that the cult of equality, the biological equality, damages the lowest people on the biological ladder worst and foremost and first of all.
Yeah, and on it's a multiple front assault. It's true, and it hurts the people who are the least able to defend themselves. You hit them with a whole word reading, making them illiterate. You hit them with single motherhood, making their children violent and depressed and cast outs and delinquents. You hit them with taking away their factory works and moving it to China. And you basically have a really screwed up part of the population.
Now, as evidence that ideas are more important than genetics by 1,000-fold, I want to mention Helen Keller. Nowadays, a girl who is deaf and dumb and blind and had all these problems, what would they do with her? Would they turn her into an author? No, they would have her in a special ed class and have her on a very restricted, stupid, dumbed-down. She would be a special needs student today, and so where we could have people who they're in our special ed classes, they could be being taught to read and write. They're not, and Helen Keller could have been trapped in a very, very preconceptual level the rest of her life if she hadn't been taught concepts correctly. So ideas really do trump everything at the end of the day.
And I want to get back to this very important point that if you have a level playing field, biologically speaking, like every action you do lead to the same outcome, then choices don't matter, right?
Right.
It's only if the playing field is extremely unlevel that ideas matter very much. So if one choice leads to a disaster because of biological predispositions, then that increases the importance of that choice manyfold. You multiply the importance of ideas with how important the biological factors are. The more important the biology is, then you can multiply that importance with the ideas with that importance.
Give an example of that.
Well, I just gave two examples.
Okay, fair enough.
If you gave if you know that a child has an IQ of 65, if you are so evil and stupid that you put them through a whole word method, then you're lobotomizing them.
Yeah, you destroyed them.
You should know that they can never, ever become a high school, like maybe they have problems finishing high school, but they can learn to read, and they can be proficient readers if they are hammering in this rote learning with phonics. And actually, I want to bring that in, rote learning. What have you heard about rote learning in public lately?
They say everything's by rote, blah, blah, blah. But rote is required to get some things in. So
and who benefits most from rote learning?
The lowest rung.
So when you say rote learning is so passé, what they're saying is that we're cutting out all the education for the low IQ people. Mm-hmm. That's what they're saying. Because biology doesn't matter.
Right.
And we have to just make it fun.
And everybody's equal.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. Low IQ people enjoy repeating things. Just look at someone with Down syndrome who has a very low IQ, like IQ 50. You can put them doing a very tedious task for you, like mindlessly boring, like completely boring, like taking one thing here and putting it there, and they can just keep amusing themselves with this very repetitive task, like telling the same joke over and over again and laughing every time. You have to have a very low IQ to be able to enjoy repetitions, right? So boredom is a sign that you don't need to repeat. If you're not bored with repetition, it means that, well, repetition is okay.
Yeah.
You're doing something good.
If you're intelligent people need novelty and change and stimulation.
And because they're so stupid that they believe that everyone is just like them, that anyone gets equally bored with repetitive tasks, they're saying no one should be doing this rote learning because I didn't enjoy it. And everyone is alike. Everyone is special. So what they are doing is that these snobbish 130 IQ elite people are forcing people with an IQ of 65 to try to understand things rather than rote learning. It has to be fun, you know. You can't have this rote learning thing. Well, the fact is that if you have an IQ of 65, you think that repetition is really fun. That is your idea of fun, repeating over and over again. Just look at a child. Even though most people grow up to a healthy and grown-up IQ, a little child of 2 years old is really dumb in terms of adult IQ. Their brain is not developed. They're stupid. What do children like to do? They like to repeat things.
Yeah. They watch the same movies over and over.
Yeah.
And they eat their meal the same way. They want you to cut the banana the same way.
They go through their low IQ phase of life, right? But then they grow out of it. But there's a certain group of people in society that don't grow out of that low IQ phase.
Right, and they are most harmed by this egalitarian nonsense.
Yes. So now I gave you actually 3 examples: phonics, rote learning, and single motherhood, or having a nuclear family. If you put these 3 in place and you allow them to keep their factory works, then you've solved basically 90% of all social problems in America.
And we're back to 1950s America.
Yeah. Back when America was great.
Back when the left hated us, they tried to change everything. The 60s, from the 60s forward, they tried to change everything about it.
Yeah. So I could give countless examples, but I've just given like three tiny examples, really, or 4 examples, where if you just implemented those, that totally transforms America. You make a difference for millions and millions of people. That you uplift them out of poverty, out of misery, out of violence, out of crime, out of hopelessness, out of having too much ambition in their life and being miserable because they can't reach their potential, and so forth. So, and those are just a few areas. I could just go on and on about things. But the general thing is that if you have a biological condition, then ideas become important. If you don't have any biological limitations, like suppose if you were God and no limitations at all, then ideas wouldn't matter at all. So it's the limitations that give ideas their importance.
Their urgency.
Yeah. And now you can also see why it's such a damaging thing to teach people that there's no such thing as biology and biology is unimportant, only ideas matter. Because if you teach them that, then you're going to say, you can be anything you want. And it's so much more fun with having fun than rote learning, because biology doesn't play into this at all, right? So you're going down a very dark path under the auspice of doing something good. You think you're doing great stuff, and you're focusing on ideas, and you're just creating hell on earth because you're not taking biology seriously. So that's the integrated view. So I repeat again, repetition is good. Misintegration means you're biologically determined. You don't really have to make choices because biology sort of plays out. Your choices or ideas don't matter. Biological indeterminism means biology is totally unimportant. What really matters is ideas. The integrated view, which I believe that Ayn Rand held, is that ideas rule the world precisely because biology matters.
Okay, so the misintegrated view is the racists who think that could be used as a way to integrate. The disintegrated view are egalitarians who think that
John Dewey,
that males should be able to play in female sports.
Yeah,
because biology doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and the integrated view is reality.
Yes, and as part of the disintegrated view is that anyone can become a rocket scientist.
Yeah, anyone can become a weightlifter on a male's weightlifting team, or a rocket scientist, or a professor.
Yeah. You just have to work hard.
You gotta dream big. No, you don't even have to work hard. You just have to dream big and make sure the world's fair to you, or find somebody to, or like the father who said to his child, "What do you say to get what you want?" And the child said, "I'm offended."
So the point here is that these ideas are truly core to understanding how to apply ideas in the world. Like, ideas are connected to reality. So think about it. If you're going to build a great engine, like, and you're dealt with crappy material, if you have a very limited amount of materials to build from. I mean, we actually have reality shows with this, where people are left out in the wilderness and they're only left a few tools, right? Now, that's an example where you're putting people in a very limited situation where they have to survive. Now, imagine how important ideas are when everything is very, very limited. Like, how you put together that engine or that hut or whatever this thing you're building now becomes crucially important. You have to think through to make use of the limitations so that you get a good result. And if you don't take into account all the facts, you're just going to make something crap.
So you're saying in extreme circumstances, intelligence becomes even more important?
Well, in this case, intelligence and ideas.
Right.
Because, I mean, you can be very intelligent, but you say, I'm a poet. Like, and then you have an intelligent poet out in the wilderness who just wants to dream that I'm thinking about great thoughts, and I'm going to get to that eating business and hunting later, but right now I'm just going to think big thoughts. He's going to die because he has bad ideas, and it doesn't matter how intelligent he is. So the point is that limitations brings out the importance of ideas.
I see. Limitations brings the importance of ideas.
And think about that. Are you familiar with 8-bit music?
No, 8-track? 8-track?
No, 8-bit. It's like Commodore 64 music, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
The Commodore 64 had only 3 voices. And they were like very simplistic things. You had pulse, you had triangle, you have sawtooth, and you had a little. It was very simple. And those limitations were like insanely limiting, and you had to be incredibly creative. And how you constructed the music became incredibly important for the final outcome. Because if you didn't take into account the limitations of your instrument, you ended up making very bad music. So what ended up happening is that people made amazing music out of this crappy instrument because they were able to push it to the absolute limit because it was limited. So you see how important that this is just an analogy of how important ideas become when you have limitations.
All right. So if we put a well-educated person with an IQ of 100 on a desert island, and we put a poorly educated person with a higher IQ on a desert island, a person with a low IQ, a lower IQ, but a good education, who understood friction, who understood gravity, who understood a few basic things about fire, electricity, or whatever. Having an average IQ but an education would give you a big edge over someone who had a high IQ but no education. So ideas are the operating factor. The IQ is less important.
Well, IQ is a tool. Just like any tool, you can use it for bigger things.
Well, okay, so let me take the example to the physical side of it real quick. Let me just say that it doesn't matter whether you're Michael Jordan or Mr. Cropper, you can still drive the freight train.
True. Good comparison. So, yeah, I think I've sort of got to the end of where I wanted to go with that.
Well, let's draw a line there. Looks like you're having trouble with your throat. Let's stop there, and we'll revisit this after viewer comments if we need to. All right.